What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to another edition of the Dolphins In Depth podcast. I'm Daniel Oyefusi. That is David Neal. Thanks so much for tuning in. Quick reminder before we start, make sure to subscribe to my Miami Herald YouTube page, comment, all that good stuff, as well as subscribe to the Miami Herald. I got you. I got you, David. I got you. Um, I am currently recording from Indianapolis, Indiana, the home of the NFL scouting combine. Oh, David's old stomping grounds. I'm enjoying myself out here where we have the top draft prospects all here to test, be evaluated, interview with teams ahead of April's NFL draft. We actually finished speaking with MIke McDaniel not too long ago. He had his podium session as coaches and GMs are meeting with local and national media. And we had a nice little 30-minute session with MIke where he spoke on a bevy of things. Obviously, Tua, fifth-year option, concussions, as well as some other stuff as the team continues into the offseason. And it's just about 2 weeks away from a start free agency. So we're going to get into all of that, starting with Tua. So obviously, as we've discussed previously, the deadline to exercise Tua's fifth-year option is May 1st. The Dolphins are still deliberating, discussing their options as it pertains to that. In his contract, it would guarantee his base salary, extend his contract through the 2024 season at a fully guaranteed price of $23 million. It's a lot of money, to invest in your starting quarterback. Obviously, it's not much compared to the top tier quarterback contracts they're being divvied out, but a lot of money nonetheless. MIke McDaniel asked how much Tua's recent concussions is going to factor into the decision to exercise the option. MIke McDaniel said that they're considering everything. He said obviously there's a lot of knowns, a lot of unknowns. There's congruent. That's what he said. Quote, a congruence in interest for the Dolphins and Tua, which includes wanting Tua to be the starting quarterback of the Miami Dolphins and play at a high level for a very long time. But again, he gave no indication of when that decision will be made. One thing that he did kind of allude and indicate is regarding the backup quarterback plan. Obviously, with Tua's injury history, you need a capable backup. Teddy Bridgewater, he was injured. He's set to become a unrestricted free agent. The only other quarterback left on the roster besides Tua is Skylar Thompson, the seventh-round pick from last year, who started a couple games, started the season-ending loss to the Buffalo Bills, had some good moments, but struggled as you would expect a seventh-round rookie to do. I asked McDaniel specifically if Skylar Thompson is ready to take on that QB2 role, or is that a position that role of a backup QB is one that the team will be looking to add. And MIke McDaniel had some very, very interesting comments. Let me pull up the story that I just wrote that you can find on the Miami Herald website. MIke McDaniel said, quote, when you look at the position from its entirety a year ago, we had a one-man room with a lot of questions with regard to where Tua was in the development of his game. And we needed someone to come in that could really help him take a step in the right direction to be a starting quarterback in the NFL at a high level. I think Teddy came and did that. As it stands right now, I was happy with what Skylar was able to do with the pretense that he's going to continue to get better. I think Tua is in a different spot. I think the team's in a different spot. And I think that there's some competitive advantages that we can bring to the room through free agency, and that's what we'll look to do. There will be competition in the room, regardless of who we sign, but I think that's something that we're definitely interested in to make the quarterback room better. He also said, and I didn't include, this was actually the first part of his quote, he said that Skylar did a lot of things to deserve to be in the competition for the backup role, but he added, I don't see that being unchallenged by any stretch. These comments were interesting to me because when you focus on the part about Tua and the team being in a different spot than they were last year, when we go back to last year, this time last year, the question was not only is Tua going to be the unquestioned starter, but who is his backup going to be? And again, the organization saw that they needed a veteran guy who maybe didn't challenge Tua for his spot, but could step in if he got hurt or whatever, but could also be kind of that veteran mentor. And Teddy, by all accounts, was. We saw the strides that Tua made in 2022. They've committed to him in 2023. So now these comments by MIke McDaniel kind of signify to me that, hey, we don't need this. We don't need like a top tier quarterback. I mean, there's a lot of talk about whether they're going to get Jimmy Garoppolo, Baker Mayfield, one of those kind of bigger name guys who, can be a starter. But it's probably more in the mode of a backup right now. My indication belief off of those comments is like, hey, we don't need one of those guys. We don't need to spend a bunch of money on that. We have a lot of confidence in Skylar, and we're going to bring in somebody to maybe push for that number 2 spot. But it doesn't need to be one of those guys that it's a long time starter and he's got a his the expectation of maybe starting. I think that I don't see them making big waves in that backup quarterback role. I mean, is that from your perspective, is that the right decision, or would you trust Skylar being QB2? Because I don't know if I've seen enough. Even obviously, you expect him to be a little bit better in year 2, but I don't know if I saw enough in year 1. And again, MIke McDaniel said they're going to bring in somebody to challenge him. But in terms of not bringing like a legit number 2, who could step in as a starter? What do you make of those comments?
I mean, obviously, you have to bring in somebody to challenge. To say you're bringing in somebody to challenge Skylar Thompson for the number 2 quarterback spot isn't really saying much. It's saying you're going to bring in somebody. I mean, for as well as he's played, I think any quarterback you bring in, you're not bringing him in just to be a third. And I also understand that you have limited resources that you can spend on improving your entire roster.
Dolphins are over the cap. Yes, they're $16 million over the cap.
So maybe that's, despite the importance of that, maybe maybe you want to try to improve some other areas, so that if you gotta play some games with Skylar Thompson, which history says you're going to have to. He has a strong support system to get him through those games. And when Tua's in the game, I mean, he's got a stronger team around him. As we discussed in the last thing, that what the Super Bowl taught us, and what really almost any championship at the pro level, in any sport, in any baseball, basketball, hockey, it's still a team game. Even in the NBA, folks, it's still a team game. And your best player, you can have the best player, but he's going to need help, and he's going to need a team around him. So if that's their thinking, that let's spend our resources to get a better team around this position, okay, I can, more so than let's really beef up this position. Yeah, I can see that. Yeah, why not? Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah. But you do have to go in acknowledging, okay, we're going to have to live with that decision for 2 or 3 games. That's just what history says. Tua does not have a history of playing every single game. Didn't come out of college with that history, and hasn't had it in the NFL. Yeah. Be it concussions, be it whatever, be it back, whatever. So.
Yeah. I mean, I know. Again, the backup position was one that I was curious to see what they would do. Obviously, last year they had Jacoby Brissett entering free agency. By all accounts, he wasn't expected to come back, and he didn't. I don't know if a lot of people had Teddy on their radar. I know I didn't. I thought that he was still a guy that could be a kind of a stopgap starter for a team, something like that. And they gave him significant money. I mean, I believe they gave him about $8 million or so. If you're trying to get a guy like Baker Mayfield, potentially Jimmy Garoppolo, I mean, I think they're definitely going to command a lot more, unless they really just have no options. So it's going to be interesting to see what they do there, as well as once OTA start, we get a training camp, how Skylar Thompson looks in year 2. Because one of the things that McDaniel spoke about among the bevy of things that he spoke about, which again, you can check that out on my Herald
Read the
website.
story. Read the story.
Yeah, read the story. There's a lot of stuff in there that we can't fit into the podcast, but he said, hey, there's a lot of continuity. He said, like, hey, some of the coaches told him that, it's been several years since they had the same offensive coaching staff, the same offensive scheme, in back-to-back seasons. So it's gonna help a lot of the players from top of the roster to the bottom of the roster in year two. So we'll see how Skylar looks in year two and whether he can be that backup quarterback. Second thing I want to touch on before we get to a break, Byron Jones. This news dates back to over the weekend. Um, Veteran cornerback who missed the entirety of the 2022 season after undergoing offseason surgery on his leg last March. He had not spoken to reporters all season, wasn't seen much in the locker room, but he kind of broke his silence, so to speak, last Saturday with a pair of quotes in which he said that he can't jump or run because of injuries that he sustained in the NFL. He also issued some caution to incoming players about taking pills and injections from medical staff to kind of help you play through injuries. The entire quote is this. Let me find it real quick. He said, "Much has changed in 8 years," and just for some context, this was last Saturday, I guess, was the 8-year anniversary or so of him participating in the NFL scouting combine when he set the record for the combine record for longest broad jump. So he says, much has changed in 8 years. Today, I can't run or jump because of my injury sustained playing this game. Do not take the pills they give you. Do not take the injections they give you. If you absolutely must, consult an outside doctor to learn to learn the long-term implications. In the second tweet, he says, it was an honor and privilege to play in the NFL, but it came at a regrettable cost I did not foresee. In my opinion, no amount of professional success or financial gain is worth avoidable chronic pain and disabilities. Godspeed to the draft class of 2023. Now, this is pretty big news because, again, Byron Jones at one time was the highest paid cornerback in the NFL. The Dolphins had very high hopes for him. In the past 3 years, he's only played 30 of a possible 50 games. Obviously, as I said before, he missed the entirety of the 2022 season. We had not heard from him. So we kind of shed some light on the state of his injury, his rehab, that kind of just stopped progressing at some point during the season, to which MIke McDaniel ruled him out. And it kind of sounded like a retirement tweet. I mean, honestly, when I first saw that, it sounded like he was kind of alluding to him not being able to play again. He said it was an honor, and the fact that he said I can't run or jump anymore, a lot of people were led to speculate and assume that he's headed to retirement. A leak source told the Miami Herald that Byron Jones is not retiring and he's not planning any type of, lawsuits or toward the Dolphins in regards to the handling of his injury. But again, it kind of brings back the issues that the Dolphins faced and continue to face with their cornerback room. That was a position that, among other many positions, suffered a lot of injuries, with Jones being kind of the headlining player there. MIke McDaniel was asked about that at the combine, and he said, I had never heard personally from Byron about any issues with his rehab assignment. He said that Jones was, quote, the conductor of the train as he was doing his rehab. And he said that he thought that the training staff, medical staff, the organization handled it really well. And he just kind of empathized with the fact that there probably is a lot of frustration from Byron Jones's part with that. Obviously, if Byron Jones is not retiring, Chris Greer at the end of season news conference last month in January, he didn't really give any insight into whether Byron Jones is going to continue to play as a Dolphin. But all kind of indications is that this is probably headed to a release. Now the problem for the Dolphins is the way this contract is structured. They really can't get much relief if they release him prior to June 1st or with the pre-June 1st designation. They take a lot of dead money, cap charge to their cap situation, which, as I said before, they're $16 million over. So in the next 2 weeks, they have to restructure some guys, they have to cut some guys, maybe extend some guys to free up money in the 2023 season. it looks like if they do part ways with Byron Jones, and I don't think it's going to be a trade because nobody's going to trade for a guy who can't play. It looks like they're going to have to cut him with a post June 1 designation, and that would essentially free up about $13 million in cap space. But the Dolphins wouldn't be able to use it until post June 1, which as we all know is weeks and weeks and months past the first waves of free agency. So kind of a tough situation for the Dolphins. Obviously, a tough situation for Byron Jones. We'll see how they handle this, but it's just kind of unfortunate, honestly, because I mean we've been talking about this for feels like about a year now. We kind of raised some questions about whether he was going to be able to return at some point this season, and then after a while, you're like, hey, I mean, there's no way he can ramp up. But it seems like the Dolphins are, they're going to be in the market for a cornerback. I mean, this was a guy who they thought would be kind of a top tandem with Xavier Howard, who has dealt with his own injuries in itself. But it doesn't look like he's going to be playing with the Dolphins in 2023. And now cornerback is seemingly one of the Dolphins' top needs. Just your overall thoughts on the tweets and the situation.
Well, it sounds like he's very frustrated. It does sound like he's very frustrated with his progress, which if you're a guy who's spent his life, running faster, jumping farther, and, doing most things better than almost everybody else, to not be able to do that or to not be able to approach that level's got to be after so long and missing an entire season. It's probably it's beyond frustrating. It's it's it makes you question like who you are. This gets to your identity, and I think that's kind of what it seems like there. And he's like, this isn't worth it or anything. Slow down, my man. Maybe he honestly feels that way now. But unless he's handled his money unwisely, he is in a situation, should be in a pretty good financial situation set up going forward in his life. And that kind of security takes a whole lot off your mind and does a whole lot for your mental health.
Yeah.
So while your physical health might not be where it might not fit your identity, your lifelong identity, your mental health should be pretty good, or at least, that's not a worry, which it is for, how much of the population of even the United States. And it just seems like it seems like something maybe he should have thought about before he tweeted. Maybe he got himself. It was the snapshot. Look, if you have these, if you're dealing with a serious health issue, it's not a life or death thing, but it's sort of like life or death of an identity. With him. And I can speak with dealing with a serious health issue in my own life where it really is kind of life or death with cancer. There are times where you get very like, what's the point? Why am I, what, it gets, why am I going through all this crap? For what? What's the worth? And you can really get that way. And if you talk to somebody who's in that state of mind right at that moment, you probably get something similar to those tweets. But so, like I said, this is not life or death, for him, but is life or death of an identity, he's had for a very long time. You know, um, football players, one of the reasons it's hard for them to retire. It's, you've been a football player for so long. That is, that's been such a large part of your identity. Even if you did other things well, even if you did a lot of other things well, you know, that was the picture on the refrigerator or on the mantle. You know, that's what, that's part of how you, or maybe the entirety of how you chose where you went to college. That's where a lot of your friends, some of your, a lot of your, the friends you didn't grow up with. Uh, that's where a lot of them come from, is football. And now, you know, this injury saying, wait a minute, you don't have the ability to be a football player anymore. That can be very tough. And that can work on your head. And so, maybe he tweeted that out of frustration. Maybe he legit feels that way and has for a while. I don't know. But I mean, sure as heck sounded like a retirement tweets. It just kind of, also kind of, warning to heads up to the 2023, draft class. Oops. I don't know. Uh, but yeah, as for what it means for the Dolphins in the, pure black and white of, okay, on the field and production, okay, yeah, they can now officially probably cross off Byron if they hadn't already,
Yeah.
and say going forward, say, okay, we need a new cornerback, and how are we going to handle this so we can, you know, how do we handle this so we can work the money properly, or work the money to our best interest.
Yeah, there's a lot of different machinations with, what happens with, a retirement, and they can kind of release his salary, cut his salary after retirement. If he doesn't, then obviously it seems like a parting of ways would come with that post June 1 cut. But we'll see how that situation resolves itself. But at the end of the day, it definitely is frustrating for all parties. This was a procedure last March that wasn't supposed to keep him out, through training camp, but he also didn't play at all. So just frustrating is the word. So we'll see just again how that ends. All right, we're gonna take a short break, but when we come back on the other side of things, we're gonna talk scouting combine. The top draft prospects are set to work out Wednesday throughout the rest of the week. We're gonna talk about positions, players to watch, and overall, what should the Dolphins' draft philosophy be this season. Stay locked with us, and we'll be back. What's going on, everybody? Still here on the Dolphins In Depth podcast, talking all things Dolphins with David Neal. So in the first half, we kind of recapped MIke McDaniel's meeting with media Tuesday. Wednesday marks the start of media interviews and various workouts for the 2023 draft class. And the Dolphins, after trading away pretty much all of their draft capital last year for Tyreek Hill, they got a couple more picks. They got 5 picks this year. They got a second rounder, a pair of third rounders, as well as some other day 3 picks. And they have a fair amount of needs to fill. You can check the Miami Herald website of my 6 prospects to watch. But those 6 prospects are each from 6 areas of need. And again, I mean, when you look at the Dolphins, yes, this is a team that made the playoffs for the first time since 2016, but they have a lot of players set to be free agents and thus a lot of needs. I mean, if you start on the offensive side of the ball, you have running back. Every single player on the active roster is set to hit free agency in some shape or form. You have tight end with Mike Gesicki expected to leave in free agency. MIke McDaniel echoed some comments from Chris Greer. When he spoke to us, he said Mike Gesicki has earned the right or earned the opportunity to be a free agent. And that tight end room, yeah, that's what that means. So that was definitely a tight end room and a position group that didn't contribute as much to the offense as they had in years past. But then you have the offensive line, where again, a lot of injuries. You got a new position coach coming in after Matt Applebaum being fired. Bushbury coming in as the new position coach there. So you got to add some pieces there to keep Tua upright. But even on the defense side of the ball, you've got some needs as well. Vic Fangio is bringing that new defensive scheme. So you need guys on every level that fits it. Obviously, at inside linebacker, you have three inside linebackers set to hit free agency, so that might be a position of need. Cornerback, we just talked about that with Byron Jones, the other injuries there. And safety, you got Brandon Jones coming off his own injury. You need a guy with to pair with Javon Holland. So the Dolphins are going to be very busy watching guys, interviewing guys. One thing that stood out to me and just kind of looking at the draft landscape, Daniel Jeremiah, who is a draft analyst with the NFL Network, he said that running back, tight end, and cornerback are some of the strongest position groups in the draft. So if you're a Miami fan, if you're in the Miami organization, that's got to be music to your ears because those are all positions that you need to add to in some way, shape, or form, whether it's free agency or whether it's in the draft after that. Definitely going to be keeping my eye out for the cornerback room and the tight end room. I think there's a lot of good names there. There's a local guy, Tyreek Stevenson, who played at UM. You have Emmanuel Forbes from Mississippi State, who kind of fits that mold of a lanky corner who can play the zone coverages. And then you have Sidney Brown, who might be a familiar name to a lot of people in South Florida. He played down here in Bradenton. He has a twin brother, Chase Brown. He's also a top running back prospect that I'm probably going to be keeping my eyes out for. He's a safety that I think could really fit in there. Those are a couple guys that I think on the defensive side we should definitely look out for. On the other side, one guy that I'm definitely looking out for is tight end Darnell Washington from Georgia. I don't know if you know about him, David, but this guy's 6'7", 270. Supposed to run a 4.6. He pretty much looks like a thinned out offensive lineman, but he runs like a running back. I'm definitely looking for him. I think that he might be the guy to complete that, right? 6'7", 270. He's supposed to be running a 4.6. That's what the reports are. I don't know if he's going to be available at 51, where I think the Dolphins are picking first. But if he's there, I mean, you might have to get him. I mean, he could be a blocker, he could be a pass catcher. I mean, he could really.
Bus. I don't know.
I mean, that's what happens when you. That's what happens with every pick, but who knows? I mean,
Yeah.
obviously, running backs. Recent history says the Dolphins aren't going to pick a running back high. I mean, Chris Greer hasn't shown the willingness or the desire to do that. Hey, but there's some really good running backs here. Obviously, Bijan Robinson from Texas is the top guy. It doesn't seem like he's going to last that far to the Dolphins' first pick. But you have Jahmyr Gibbs from Alabama, who could be a really good pass catching back. Chase Brown, as I said before, I mean, his NFL comp on Draft Network is Raheem Mostert. So, I mean, hey, Raheem Mostert's about to be a free agent. Maybe you resign him. Maybe you don't. Maybe you bring in a guy like Chase Brown. He's a real burner. MIke McDaniel loves speed. So, I mean, those Dolphins have a lot of different options and different avenues that they can go with that first pick. Well, who knows? They might even trade it. I mean, they did that last year, traded away a bunch of picks for Tyreek Hill. And I've seen this on social media where some people are saying, like, hey, we're in win now mode. Like, why not trade those picks? I mean, trade that second round pick, trade some of those third round picks. One name that has been kind of linked, not really, but just kind of maybe hypothesized as a potential addition in Miami is Jalen Ramsey, the all-pro cornerback from the Los Angeles Rams. Reports came out last week that the Rams are expected to trade him as they try to, recoup some draft capital, free some cap room as they, rebound from that, 5-12 season or, that sub 500 season they had last year. I saw PFF kind of put a proposed trade out there where the Dolphins give a second and a third and kind of swap some picks to get Jalen Ramsey. I've seen there's been kind of some, some people saying, hey, like, let's bring in an elite cornerback with Xavier Howard, really set the tone on defense. Bigger picture philosophically, I mean, first off, I'm not really a fan of that move. I think that the draft compensation plus the new contract that you probably have to give him, because I think that he's probably going to look for a new contract because he doesn't have any guaranteed base salary left on there. So he's definitely probably going to want some new money in that deal. The combination of that plus the draft pick that you probably have to give up to get a guy who's an all-pro cornerback, he's not even 30 yet. He's still, in the prime of his career. I don't know if we do that there. And I do understand that the Dolphins are in win now mode. I mean, They showed that by trading for Tyreek Hill, trading for Bradley Chubb. But I think you've reached the point, especially with their cap situation, where you need like your younger guys to step up, and you need to continue to build through the draft. I mean, the Dolphins had a couple of years where they didn't have a bunch of great drafts. They got Laramie Tunsil and they got Minkah Fitzpatrick a couple of years back, but you traded those guys away. You had some really good draft. You had a really good draft class in 2021 with Javon Holland and Jalen Phillips and Jalen Waddle. But I think I don't know. I'm very hesitant to like do what a lot of some of these quote unquote win now teams have done, where you kind of just stack big rosters and big names and give up big contracts and just kind of push the money back a couple of years and say, hey, we're gonna try to win now. Obviously, if you're the Rams, you're perfectly fine with that because it resulted in a Super Bowl championship. So you'll pay the price for that. But if you don't win a championship, it can really come back to bite you. I'm not in the mood. If I'm the Dolphins, I'm not in the mood of it has to be right player, right price, which is kind of a cliche that you hear all the time. But I don't think that this is right player, right price and contract with Jalen Ramsey. And I think bigger picture philosophically, I know the Dolphins are going to make moves to they're going to make moves to free up money. Chris Greer said, "Hey, we're going to have money to make moves in free agency." But I don't know if unless it's like you get a really really good deal for a player, I'm not in the business of like trading away all the Dolphins top picks again, unless you're getting a really really good player with a contract that's not going to be to your detriment. I'd like to see the Dolphins, after bringing in that veteran talent, I like to see them continue to build through the draft because again, these veterans aren't going to be here forever. I mean, Teron Armstead's not going to be here forever. Tyreek Hill's not going to be here forever. I like to see them balance out some of their big swings in recent years by bringing in some, scouting the right guys, hopefully bringing in the right guys, and having them kind of complement the roster that you've built together. What do you think overall about kind of trading away picks, being in win now mode, and kind of the Dolphins' options this offseason?
I'm not sure I don't, they played one playoff game in the last, two playoff games really in the last, what, 15
Seven,
years,
yeah. Oh yeah. Well, yeah,
three in the last 15 years, something like that.
yeah.
How the heck are you in win now mode?
I mean, they see a
I
window.
mean,
They see a
how
they
can
see a
you?
window. They see a window with Tua. They saw
Yeah,
how well he played, and they think that hey, we can make some moves.
and that window can slam shut on your head and fingers real fast.
It can, but you got to
With
keep it. You got to keep it as wide open as possible. So why?
yeah, oh,
That's the thought process from a lot of people.
yeah, that's no. They're not where the Rams were 2 years ago. They're not. They're not. They're just not.
I mean, the Rams. Okay, so obviously the Rams had reached the Super Bowl before that.
Right and the Rams, you know, the Rams weren't in the second year of they weren't their it was the second year of their coach. you know, they didn't have a second year head coach. The Rams were just further along, and um uh I don't I the Dolphins, you can't be forever, building for the future, but I don't think look that move for Bradley Chubb said, "Oh, we're in win now mode." Okay, and you know that window again slammed shut on their fingers real fast, or actually slammed shut on their head real fast when you know Tua went out. And Bradley Chubb it seemed like a good idea, but he really didn't have the kind of effect on that defense and more pointedly on opposing offenses that you wanted him to have. Um, I just think they have too many holes. They have too many holes on this team this year and going forward to start saying, okay, let's put all our chips in on you know on bringing in this individual who's also going to cost us a jackload of money, when we're already way over the cap, and now we're gonna have to try to restructure a whole bunch of other guys or cut a whole bunch of other or cut some people, and you wind up with depth holes that you didn't have before. The people think of things in a vacuum. Like again, and it's not just a fan. People say, "Oh, it's a fantasy football mindset." No, no, no. It's just that's the way fans think. Fans make great fans. Fans don't make great GMs. And you know, it's not just you trade this for that. It's okay, you trade this for that, but then that moves this piece, that moves this piece, that moves this. It's roster Jenga, and you got to keep the whole thing from collapsing on you, and you got to keep from having to take out a piece that it's kind of important, and it's going to kind of be important, if not now, down the line. It's going to be important down the line, and so I'm not a big fan of making a big splash trade. I'd rather see them, draft well, even though the draft is such a dice roll. There are very few sure things, no sure things really. Look, if you think there are sure things in this draft, you just got to remember half the GMs in the NFL would have taken Ryan Leaf or Peyton Manning.
Yeah, it's definitely a crapshoot. I mean, for
You know,
as many hits as Chris Greer has made, he's had a
you
lot of.
you have a lot of misses made. You have you know that you have a lot of smart moves made, and you have and sometimes the smart moves are made by accident. So much as that's the case, what is also the case is this team has too many holes to start packaging picks and not also they're not in the best financial situation to be packaging picks and send them off for one or two big time players, and I think they can only get one with what they've got. Unless you're willing to start moving some other players, important players, which again creates more holes that you then don't have the draft picks to fill, or you don't have the free agency money to fill because you're going to be sending that money over to the couple big names you brought in. It doesn't work. I don't think it works. If they can make it work, go great, more power to them, and go for it. But I don't see that working. I don't see that working like that. I think it's. I think you have to use your picks wisely. This is not necessarily a best player. I don't know if you're a best player available, but when it comes to drafting in any of the sports, I've always believed if you believe in your scouts, if you believe in your scouting system, you stay true to your, how you have everybody ranked, and you stay true to your board and your needs. And in NFL, you can draft to need also. So, go for that. And but yeah, it's a tough situation for the Dolphins.
Yeah, I mean, well, the precedent and the recent successes there to kind of advocate for it. Obviously, making the big swing for Tyreek Hill. That I mean, the Dolphins will do that 11 out of 10 times again. But obviously, again, it was a little bit of a different position. They kind of had more draft capital since then. They've used the first rounder and some other picks to get Bradley Chubb. Lost one of their picks because of tampering and whatnot, so they really don't have as many picks this year. But again, the recent moves have shown that the Dolphins think they're in a win now mode, and I like that visual, that roster Jenga, because again, that's what Chris Greer and that front office is doing over the next couple of weeks. They're freeing up space, thinking of moves to make, players to part ways with, and how that creates other roster holes. So there's a lot to balance there, and the Dolphins do have some. I don't want to say significant needs, because I think that over the course of free agency, there's a lot of guys that they can bring back to kind of fill the void. And I do think ultimately they're gonna be active in free agency. I mean, they can't be $16 million over the cap when the new league year starts and when free agency opens. So I think that they are going to be active. They are going to be able to make one or two, significant moves, get some starting caliber players in there. But again, with that draft pick and those draft picks, and maybe making that move for Ramsey, maybe targeting another veteran, and putting in absorbing a really big contract. I'm just not the biggest fan of that. Like I agree with you. I think that it's best for them to, if they can, if they again, if they find a guy who is the right price, and maybe you're giving up like a pair of day 3 picks, or a day 2 pick and a day 3 pick, and it's not a huge contract that's gonna really mess with your ways to build the rest of the roster, I go for it. But I would like to see the Dolphins kind of complement this roster that they've built with some talent, get some guys who can contribute, and get them on some of those young cheap contracts. So again, we'll see what they do. The Dolphins are definitely going to be busy over the next couple of weeks, as they are right now. Well, that brings us to the end of another edition of the Dolphins In Depth podcast. I want to thank you guys, as always, for tuning in. Reminder to subscribe to the Miami Herald YouTube page, like, share, comment, subscribe to the Miami Herald as well. I'm going to be here all week in Indy, providing wall-to-wall content, top draft prospects, what I'm hearing, what's going on in Indy. So again, definitely check that out. I already have 2 stories posted from Tuesday from MIke McDaniel speaking on everything from Tua to jiu-jitsu, judo, all that good stuff. So we've got a ton of content for you, and we're going to keep it going all off season. We'll see you next week to recap another week of Dolphins football and football across the next week and the week after and the week after and the week after. We got a lot of stuff to recap.
All right.
So we'll see you next week.
They pay me, but it's all right.
Until then, you guys take care. Bye.
Peace.